All right, today we're going to see some dynamic materials. There's the bread and butter for creating animated variable looks for any experience game, VR, or anything you have made in Unreal Engine. So we're going to start with a brand new project. All right, for now it's just going to be a regular Blueprint project. We're not going to go into C++, maybe later, the tutorials. Blueprint is good enough to manage some behavior without getting too in-depth with doing things efficiently with C++. So just for sakes of interaction, we're going to try some third-person view project. I name it Rainbow Stairs. We're gonna make some rainbow stairs with this example. Okay, now a project is created. You'll notice in Unreal Engine when you have a default level being loaded, you already have materials assigned to all objects. In this case, we have this object called ramp. Ramp material is assigned to it. Now, these are static material, which means this is the shader. We have here a color input into the base color, but you cannot change these. So what we want to do with a dynamic material is to be able to change the parameters on gameplay. So whenever your character comes close to maybe the stairs, it will actually change. That requires something called dynamic materials, and of course another one called instances. So we're gonna go through that in a second. We start by always in Unreal Engine, it starts to get messy. We don't have a proper organization, so I always recommend having a folder called materials. Once you're in materials, to create a new material, you can go from this menu, or you can create an add new, and you find it right away on the first set of create basic assets. So click on make new material. You can put a name. Some people like to put a prefix of M before their regular materials, and in this case we're gonna just name it step, M step. Let's open it up. Once we open it up, if you right click on the layout that appears, you can start typing tree vector. So constant tree vector. In this case, it's gonna be RGB, and we connect it here. And this looks pretty static, just like any other, render engine as Arnold or like Redshift or anything else. You have a vector, and that's all you get. You don't have a chance of modifying dynamically how things look. So what we're gonna do here is, even though you can change a color right away, that will be static. So what we want to do is right click on it and then convert to parameter. I'm gonna do that again so you can take a look at it. So select it and then put convert to parameter. Once that's done, you can put a variable name to it. In this case, I'm gonna just, for the sake of clarity, I'm gonna put base color. It's the same name as this one, if you notice. So then you just have to select the default color you want. You can just to make sure that it's working later on, you go to saturation 0, maybe you want 0.5 or even probably a bit darker, something like that. There you go. So hit apply. So you actually apply the changes, save. If you notice here that we used to have little asterisk, if you start doing things, let's say I add another node and then I start connecting things, I start changing them, you is gonna start noticing that you need to hit apply, and then you actually need to hit save before this goes away. I'm gonna disconnect this again. So always make sure whenever you have changes in your material to hit apply, and if you like it, of course, save. Otherwise, you're not gonna see the changes. Now that we have our material, I mean, you can apply this to anything, right? So you can just drag and drop. You can put it here to this box, and if you are to open it up and change the color of it, you know, apply, save, you can start seeing things changing over there. Now, if I start playing on the game, that's it. That you cannot change that anymore. That color on that asset. So what we want to do is that we want to have our character react. I mean, this asset react to our character and actually change the color. So that will allow you to have pickups and anything else in game that reacts whenever you touch them. So in order to do that, we need more than this current setup. The way of doing it is right-clicking on it, and then you're going to create a create material instance. So a material instance is basically a copy of what we have of the material, but it doesn't have to. It does not take as much. I'll put it in an easy way. It does not take as much processing by Unreal Engine when you have it in game. So it's a way of keeping things efficiently without having unique materials assigned to all of it. You have a single material instance assigned to all the level, then it's gonna count as one, not as much as having repeated materials that can actually lower your frame rate. So that being said, what we're doing right now is we're gonna open our material instance, and if you notice here, we have our base color. The base color, you can actually start changing it. Now, take a look at it. We still haven't assigned it, so let's assign it to another one. Let's put it this one. Now, before we had to go in, change the color, click save, apply, all of that. Now you can change this material directly here. This allows us to see things in our editor in real time when we actually have changes, and this is really useful. Let's say you're working with a character and you don't want to be like back and forth saving and applying to see if the color of the skin is correct. So you create a material instance, you apply it to the skin, and then you start modifying the variable that you leave exposed here to be able to tweak faster. Now, that's just one benefit of managing material instances. We're gonna do another one with gameplay. So in this case, let's introduce another concept. So we have materials. Now we can have a dynamic object, and in this case, something in Unreal Engine that is an object, but also has a certain behavior. We will use something called an actor. So you go to the add new, and then you select blueprint class. You're gonna be able to select something called an actor. So an actor is an object can be placed or spawned in the world. But the interesting part about this one, and we're gonna put here a step, is that once you open it, it allows you to define events, and it allows you to define behavior. So what we want to do is that when our character collides with one of these steps, the step changes color. And we want this to happen whenever we are in the game. All right. So once you have, okay, I'm gonna just step back a little bit so you can take a look at what I did, how this was created. So again, right click, blueprint class, then click actor, and you're gonna create one of these. Okay. Once you have it in your content browser, if you grab that one and then you drop it to the scene, nothing happens because it's empty right now. So what we want to do is actually select it, double click in it. Oops, did that actually open? There you go. So in this case, we have our own viewport here, as you notice, and on our components list here, we can add also different kinds of elements, and one of them is something called static mesh. So we're gonna add a static mesh, and this static mesh, we're gonna name it, well, just leave it like static mesh. There's not really importance for that. In this one, you have the details panel, and in here you can select the kind of mesh you want. So I believe stairs may be in there. No. We're just gonna select a cube, just to keep it simple. So now we have our cube. You know, cubes and all of the objects inside this mode can also be modified in scale. So I'm gonna do something that looks a little bit like a step. There you go. Now, this is a static mesh. This does not react by itself. It needs a trigger. So there's something called box collision. We're gonna grab one of those, and in this case it's underneath the static mesh, which is fine. We are gonna just scale it up. It's probably a little bit too big. Yep. That's massive. Let's put maybe 2, 2, 2. There you go. So this is a collision box. So this allows, it's gonna allow us to detect whenever our character approaches and touches it. It's gonna allow us to put an event, and that event is gonna trigger our material inside this step to change. So how do we do that? So far we've been able to change directly in our viewer with the material instance here, you know, and add something. Now what we want to do again is change it whenever you're already playing the level. So we're gonna go back, open this. Right. You'll notice whenever you open, by default, you have 3 different events. We have the event begin play. You have that's whenever the first action that happens with the character. Then you have a actor begin overlap and event tick. So tick happens every frame. This happens once. We also have something called a construction script. The construction script happens whenever you grab and drop something here. But what we want to do is have one of these events that is related to an action, and in this case it's an overlap of our character with the box. So if you select the box and you scroll down all the way down here, you're gonna see that this box, the one we created, if you notice, I'm gonna drag it up and down, that one has events. So what we want to say is on component begin overlap, and that means that whenever something starts to overlap this area, there you go. So whenever this is overlapped, we want to do something. So in Unreal Engine we have these nodes which define a timeline. We're gonna go, this is an action, and then another one, another one, another one. So we're gonna grab, let's see. Okay, I know what we're gonna do. We're gonna actually assign first the material to this static mesh, because right now, if you notice, this static mesh, you know, has a default material. Okay, it has a cube material. It doesn't have our instance that we created here. So to do that, we're gonna do it in the construction script, which means whenever the object is constructed, the first time that, you know, it starts to be live in our scene. So I'm gonna do here, and we're gonna go to create dynamic material, create dynamic material instance. You see it here. So dynamic material instance is just our material instance that we have here. This is something that is created dynamically on the fly on the game. And it asks us to select which material is the one we want to be based it on. The one what we currently have that we're basing off our instance over here is called mstep. This is the one, if you take a look again, that has the base color that we set at the beginning, that has a variable. So in Unreal Engine, you can actually select the material you want, this one, and then just click on the little arrow and it will assign it. So now we're creating a dynamic material instance out of the one that is the master one, the other one that we had over here. Okay? So from here, you already created material and you're assigning it, actually the target is the one that you're going to be assigning it to. So now it exists. If we click play, click compile, and we click play, okay, you cannot see it right now because it's actually, we have to, let's change this color, the default color of our material, to something that we know is the default value. There you go. The green should be good enough to see, right? So you take a look at this and we go to our static mesh. Do you notice it's a cube material, right? Now, how come is a cube material that has everything that is great, there's nothing else is the default? How come we can actually get this bright green? Well, that's what I was mentioning, that the construction script will run as soon as you grab and drag and drop something onto the scene. So it's already running. So it's already making the selection and saying, hey, in the construction, whenever this object is in our viewport, take this mesh and out of this material that we have here called mstep, make a dynamic material instance and assign it to it. So we have it now. Now the next step is to actually change it. To do that, we have to go now to our overlap of the area we have here. So from here, we're gonna say, okay, when the actor overlaps, we wanna say, hey, change that material that we have to another color. But how are we gonna reference it? Well, when we create a dynamic material, you see this node over here, it says return value. So it's gonna say, okay, I'm creating the dynamic material and I want to make sure that I want to save it. So you right click on it, you can say promote to variable. And you can name this. You have here your variables over here, you can take a look. And this one is called new var 0 by default, and it says material instance dynamic. So you can name it material instance step instance. So we kind of we know what we're talking about. Once we have that, you can say, okay, whenever the box is overlapped, you can let me see, set. No, we're not gonna set it, we're gonna get it, and we're gonna say set parameter value. So there's 3 types of values you can change for a material, and it's vector, the one we are gonna do right now, that is a color, RGB. You can change a texture, and you can change a value that will be 0, 1, 2, 3 unitary value. So we're gonna put it here, and we're gonna say whenever our box that is here, I'm gonna select it, there you go. Whenever that is overlapped, change the material instance, that is a variable that we have here that was created whenever we constructed the dynamic material. Whenever that happens, change the value of the material that has the parameter here. We have to change it, by the way. Change the parameter called none. Now, none is the default. We want to specify the parameter value that we had at the beginning, in this case base color. So we're just gonna put here base color, and we're gonna just leave it on black so you can take a look what happens. Now it changes, see that? Now we can get a bit more playful with it and say, well, maybe what if you don't want to have a black color? Maybe we're gonna do something different here. You can right click on this value and then split struct bin, which what it does is that it will allow you to modify the RGB value independently. We're gonna select random float. Now with random float, I'm just gonna have 3 of them. I'm gonna make something funky here. What I'm doing now is that I'm creating a random float, and I'm gonna assign that random float to the RGB value. Let's see what happens. So now every time we touch that box, a trigger box, it's gonna give us a random RGB that is assigned to the material. So let's kind of recap to see what we did with this. We started with a material. You can take a look. I right click here. It says material. That material was created through the menus that is here, and we go selected, created. Once the material was created, we went and set 3 vector parameter. And once that was done, I right click and then I convert to parameter. Once the parameter was created, we change the parameter name to base color. Then we created an actor by going right click, blueprint class, and then selecting actor. Once the actor was created, we double click on it. We added a component. In this case, it was a static mesh. The static mesh was added here. We selected a type of mesh. I selected the 1 meter cube. Then I went ahead and I added a box collision. I drop it in here. We change the scale of it to fit the area and above from the little step that we have here, the box. Once that happened, we went to the construction script, and in the construction script, I added the node called create dynamic material instance, which will take as an input the static mesh, this one. You can actually drag and drop, as you can see. Put it to the target, select the source material that we're gonna use. In this case, is our main material here. And from there, we save it to a variable called step material instance by right-clicking and creating a variable, which then is added here under the list of variables. Once that was done, I went to the event graph, and with my box component selected, I click on component begin overlap, which allows me to define an action of what happens when we intersect with that component. Then I drag here from this little arrow, and I selected set vector parameter value. In this one, I input the name of the variable from our main material, and I added a color to be changed once we hit that box component. So in this example, we'll be able to see how to add a material instance that changes based on the construction. Also one that can be just added for your capacity of quickly editing, and one that changes in gameplay once we touch it or we interact with it. That's all for this time, and hopefully I'll go ahead and do a bit more complex things based on the feedback I get from this one. Thank you.